Okay, I think we got this running again now, right? Yeah, it looks about right. Little green screen on a green shirt. C'est la vie. Ooh, hey, maybe made it pop just a little bit. Anyway, supposedly you can hear me, and I have to keep this to under 15 minutes because that's what YouTube lets me do on this channel. But it's been a rough couple of weeks. It was my birthday too, so there's that going for it. Um, so yeah, I got the news from my doctor the about 5 days before my birthday. Not even a week. My birthday's a little tricky. I've got my actual birth date and my legal birth date, and they're a few days apart. The reason behind that is when I was born on the floor of a cabin in the woods in a rural part of New Hampshire. And as I was raised after adoption, the paperwork that was transferred for me was different. Part of that is because I was born on the floor of a cabin in the woods in rural New Hampshire. And so they couldn't register my birthday until a subsequent business day at the nearest town office that had a registration of births. So I was registered in a different town. I was born on a Friday night. And so the first day they could get me registered for being born was Monday morning in a different town. So my legal birth date is that Monday morning. My actual birthday was that Friday night. So I'm technically born on the 24th, but my birthday's the 27th. Anyway, so I got my news about my medical stuff delivered to me on the 20th of June. But I'm operating under the impression that this is bullshit. Like, this is just bullshit. Like, I can't do anything about it at this point. I think where I left it last time was I saw the doctor. First time I've ever seen this doctor. He saw me for 20 minutes, greeted me by the wrong name. He said, "Hey Keith, my name is not Keith. It has never been Keith. It is not even close to Keith. It starts with a K, and that's about with K-E. It's got about the same parallels between it." And he even later said that when he saw the paperwork saying that he was seeing Keith like a different last name. I mean, it has the same start as my last name, but it's not even the same last name. I'm like, that's not who you're seeing, dude. Get with the program. And so when he came in, he saw me for about 20 minutes. Part of what he saw when he came in is just talking to me for a few minutes. Had me close my eyes and touch my nose with my fingers. Okay. Had me hold my hands out. And did that. Have me resist holding my arm up like this. Hold my arms up like this and have him push down on my arms. And then he had me walk down a hallway 5 or 6 steps. Did a reflex hammer on my knees. And that was mostly what he did. I think he did a few other things where He was trying a few other things, but I had to prompt him for a couple other things to be done. But he never once in that whole time looked at my chart. And in that whole time of not looking at my chart, he sort of poo-pooed some of the things I was saying. Like I asked whether this might be something like a functional neurological disorder. Because as somebody with post-traumatic stress disorder, I do know that my psychology can affect my physiology in certain ways. Um, but he's like, you don't have any seizures, and that's not a requirement for having FND. But I mean, I guess by some old school standards, that's an expectation of that, some non-epileptic seizures. But and I'd be curious to see how we're defining that, because I have these fits that I sometimes have where I can remember it like in January where I was watching, maybe not this January, maybe it was last January. I was watching people reacting to either Firefly or The Last of Us. I love those series. I love them immensely. But the emotional charged scenes in those movies and series can get me to a point sometimes where I shake like a chihuahua. And I always just thought it was this weird quirk of my physiology. And I figured some people do it and some people don't. But I guess not a lot of people do it. And there's a part of me that wonders if that's counts as a type of seizure. But I don't know. I think the only way to get an answer to that question would be to do an EEG while I'm having an episode. But for the most part, I would say I do not have seizures, unless absence seizures count where I zone out. But I'm autistic, so does that reflect my hyperfocus or shutdowns? Who knows? Like it's so when somebody dismisses you outright like that and doesn't take into consideration that presentations might be slightly different in different people, it tells me right away that like I can't take most of what he says at face value. I need a second opinion for this stuff. But so we went through some of this stuff, the dismissal of that. He never once looked at my charts at all before we had any of these conversations. He described what he saw as my shaking. Let's see if I can you see this? Yeah, okay. So this is stable. I can hold it stably in this hand too. No problems. It's when I add, oh, even the ring finger's pretty good. It's when I add the pinky finger into the mix that it gets a little shaky. But here's the thing about it. That's not even all that bad. But this is worse than I've been in 6 months. The emotional stress of this has definitely done more to me in the last couple weeks than I'd gotten better during the last 6 months. And now I'm sort of set back a good ways. But at the same time, I happen to know one other person that I met at a party in October who has had recent onset migraines with visual scintillating scotomas, which are blobs of jaggedy moving pieces that block out your vision for a period of time. I had my first one of those last year in March, and they lasted until about July, and then I hadn't had one. I haven't had a migraine even without the visual aspect in almost a year until I had one after stressful stressful night of arguing with somebody after 2 nights of no sleep. And it's like that disruption probably led to the most recent episode of a migraine for me. But I know somebody I met at a party in October, a friend of a friend, who in the last 2 years has developed migraines with an ocular presentation. He didn't know what they were. I told him what they were. And later, unprompted, while he was talking to somebody else, he mentioned he has a slight tremor in his ring finger and his pinky finger on his left hand, like I do. So it tells me newly emerging ocular migraines with a tremor in the pinky and ring finger of your left hand is a pattern that somebody else has seen. Now, every neurologist I've seen in the last year and a half has completely ignored those elements. The migraines don't matter to them. Sometimes they just happen to people. Some people get migraines later in life. Yeah, but that's part of the feature of what's happened with the frickin' tremor. So, does that disqualify it from Parkinson's? Not necessarily. But the fact that you're not taking it into consideration as part of the symptom set tells me you're not paying attention to the patient and the symptoms. And then the neurologist tells me that he says it's a resting tremor. A resting tremor is if my hand was shaking right now, it's not. An action tremor is when you do an action that causes you to shake in a way. I don't have those shaking tremor in my right hand. And I think that's part of where he comes with the idea of Parkinson's, is because it's predominantly on one side. So he said he'd set up a test for a dopamine scan. I asked him whether or not dopamine levels present differently in people with autism, post-traumatic stress disorder, anxiety, and depression, which are all things I have, and post-traumatic stress disorder. And he said there's 0 incidence of false positives. And I'm like, that's a red flag to me, because any test that requires an expert's analysis to interpret properly has room for false positives. So if you're telling me there's 0 false positives, you don't know enough about the test to be able to tell me whether or not it's accurate. So I have my reservations about some of that. But at the same time, they said they'd set up this test for within a week of the appointment, and I waited a couple days over the weekend and contacted them on Monday saying, like, well, you guys were supposed to set up a test for me. And they said, well, we're contacting the people we're referring you to get the test from. And I went, all right. And they said, we'll let you know when we have information. And a whole week goes by, nobody contacts me. So I call them up on a Friday night and say, hey, you guys were supposed to contact me about this. And they said, like, if you haven't heard from the people doing the test, then you should call them up and find out what's the delay. So I called them up and talked to the people supposedly doing the test, and they transferred me over to the department that's supposed to run the test. And they got a hold of me eventually, and when I got a hold of them, they said nobody had put in a referral. So I called back the first organization that was supposed to be setting up the referral, my neurologist department, and they said, we totally sent it to them. I don't care at this point. Somebody needs to send the referral on and get this test set up. It took another 5 days for that to get all organized up. Finally got a positive scheduling for the test, and the test is scheduled for the end of July. And you're like, you gotta be kidding me. So I'm supposed to sit on this idea that I have this brain rot that's going on and my brain's dying inside my skull for a whole month, based off of some guy who gave me 20 minutes of his time and gave me false or inaccurate information. So I think I'm just kind of done with worrying about it right now. I can't spend the whole month worrying. I'll get you for the next video here.